So we learned a lot through the technology seal of approval process. As I shared, it really is a testament to the power of the alliance. And it also is a great indicator of what it means when you plant a seed. When an idea is kind of presented, and it starts off as a small, kind of concept, something that people are trying to work through, and ultimately grows to something much larger. We've been having this conversation around the American dream, and I believe the American dream has always been about the seeds that have been planted by individuals before us. When I think of this idea of how higher education is connected to our American dream, I think a lot about my family, and I think particularly about one of my recent guilty pleasures has been working and looking through Ancestry DNA. And I found so much amazing stuff about my family that I didn't know, learned about new relatives, actually got a chance to participate in a family reunion with relatives on this side of the country that I never knew existed. And I learned something very, very unique about my family. And although they were a family that initially were sharecroppers and individuals that worked a lot of manual labor types of jobs, education was something that they always focused on. It was something that they always said, you can't have it taken away from you. And it's something that they planted as a seed in the minds of many of my relatives. My great-grandma, Meemaw, was actually a chef here in New Orleans. My grandmother actually went to school at Dillard University. And yes, I know we got some Dillard folks. And my parents actually kind of took that seed and continued to grow with it. My father worked in trio programs for most of his life. My mother was a university registrar and worked in enrollment management. And so, that picture up there is actually the picture of my father with some of my relatives in Mississippi. And those two individuals, they continued that idea of keeping that seed nurtured and fertilized and moving forward. And they produced this young man right here. So as you can see, these bow ties have been going on for a long time now. And some of you are laughing a little too hard. I'm sure if I go to your mama's house, I'm going to find some pictures that you are ashamed of as well. But the thing that, through that process in planting seeds around education, it's so crazy because all I wanted to do was never be my parents. I did everything I could to stay away from, being an educator or focusing on higher education. I was a mediocre student. I swirled between multiple campuses. As my father would say, I was a knucklehead. But on the screen, Clark Atlanta University is where all of this came together for me. It's an historically black college, minority-serving institution in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I think about all these stories and these seeds that have been planted, and I'm like, wow, I truly have become my father and mother. And all of us fight that sometimes, but ultimately it all comes back around. And what I also realize is that seed that was planted has been carried through to my children. They are the dreams and the prayers of ancestors that they've never met. And so for my son, one of the things is that he is always thinking about his dreams and what he wants to be. And then he gets a little anxious and nervous. And so he talks sometimes about, what if I don't live up to my dreams? I mean, he's a kind of a cerebral 9-year-old. I mean, this is the kid who literally talks to his college-age babysitters and asks them if they're taking 15 credit hours. So that's the kind of world he lives in. But one of his favorite poems is one by Langston Hughes, and it's called Harlem, but a lot of people know it as A Dream Deferred, because he's always wondering, what if I don't live up to my potential? What if my dream doesn't come true? And so he memorized this poem, A Dream Deferred.
What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore, and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? A Dream Deferred by Langston Hughes.
When, when I think about that whole idea of a dream deferred and that notion of the dream that's deferred, for many students on our campuses, that dream deferred may mean not finishing school, or it can mean not finishing school or finishing school, but with a whole lot of debt. And I am not immune to that conversation. This visual up here is a note that I got from Fed Loan, literally, what is it, October? A couple of months ago, saying that I have finally paid off my student loans. Now, I'm going to share something with you about this. So I live in Indiana. The student loan corporation that I had to pay my payment to is literally on the exit that I have to get off on. So every single day I had to pass by it, going and coming to work. So you know, like when people get married and they have like all these like life-changing moments, they do these photo shoots. So when I made my last payment, I went over there and like did my own photo shoot. You know what I'm saying? Like I had to embrace it. I had to embrace it. You know, and I will admit that, for my children, they'll never have to think about that dream being deferred for them. They'll never have to think about it the way that many students that we know and that we work with have to experience. You know, my son, his problem is like, if we go to a football game, we sit down low in the good seats, and he's like, why aren't we in the suite today? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, okay, dude, you're just on a whole nother level. So when I think about all this stuff and everything that's going on, what I've realized is that my thinking has evolved when it comes to a dream. Initially, I just wanted to make sure that I was not poor and broke and had to go back to my mama's house. That was my dream. And then I realized that higher education could be my path to a personal dream of freedom and one of humanity. And then as I've gotten older, I realized that's not something I just want for myself and for my family. I want all families and all children to be able to have access to that dream. I don't want to see dream hoarders, as Richard Reeves talked about a little earlier. I want the Complete College America Alliance to be dream accelerators. I want us to be dream energizers. That's what we do. That's the work that's in front of us. And we have the opportunity to do that. It's one of the reasons why I work at Complete College America. One of the things I love about Tom Sugar is he has all these, I call them Tomisms, but we'll sometimes, and he'll say some stuff that really gets you riled up. But one of the things he said to me is like, we're not in the business of navel gazing. And so the idea of just sitting back admiring a problem. If there is a problem out there, we are going to work to fix it. And a few of you that have been in here for a couple of years might have seen me on the stage talking about this idea of my evolution around careers and how I was good in science and was from Southern California and loved water sports, so thought I was going to be the African-American Jacques Cousteau. And so, but the thing about that story that I failed to share is that there was something that was learned through that process at Clark Atlanta University, something that helped me understand the skills that I needed and how the thing that I even didn't really want to go into had an impact on what I could be in the future. And so, when we think about pathways, we've always thought about this as the most direct route to getting to your destination. That's how we've kind of framed this pathways discussion, and you'll hear more about it. But now we're also thinking that there are a lot of things that influence that pathway. So even when you put in something in your GPS, the first thing you need to know is, where do I want to go in the first place? Strata Education Network, which is one of the organizations that is funding our Purpose First work, actually did a study with Gallup, and they found that 36% of individuals said that they would choose a different major. And what that told me was that we really need to rethink and really incorporate into our Pathways movement the front end of that work. How do we ensure that students think about purpose first? How do we assist students in making that big choice? That's the Purpose First project that we've been talking about over the past couple of years, and we've been learning a lot of things. One of the first things that we've learned is that a lot of people are concerned when we start talking about market-driven narratives. I will just demystify that immediately. We are not talking about and not expecting all students at 18 years old to know what they want to do for the rest of their life. It's not only about jobs, although jobs are important. It's still about learning. It's still about growth. It's still about development. It's still about purpose. And when we think about equitable outcomes, any of you that have counseled or advised low-income students, first-generation students, students that are just trying to figure out how to do this college thing, one of the things we realize is that they want a job really bad. And if we don't have that conversation with them on the front end, we're not starting them off on a strong path. And absolutely, thank you. And so we tried to figure this all out, and one of the things that we realized is that we needed to figure out who was doing this work and how do we put all the pieces of the puzzle together. How do we make those connections with those organizations that are already living in this space, and how do we bring them together in this work? And we're extremely pleased that organizations like ACRO and NACADA and NACE and NCDA, and NASPA have all said this is something that we want to be a part of, and it's something that we've been doing. And so once we figured that out, we realized our problem is really not one of ideas. We don't have an innovation problem. Our problem is a problem of execution. We can make these things happen because the answers already exist, and these organizations have been working through it. And what we've been working on together is a shared set of principles around Purpose First, and they're up here on the screen. So we've been thinking about things like higher education as a launching pad and embedding career exploration early and often in that process, making sure that state systems and institutions create a culture of purpose. And so a little later on, probably in the early part of the year, you'll get a chance to see all of these organizations publish a shared set of principles and practices surrounding Purpose First. We are going to operationalize the onboarding process to ensure that students have a good connection between their major choice and their career pathways.